Old guy here. A couple of videos ago, I was looking at thread tracers, and I looked at Amazon, and I determined that at least 99% of these thread tracers on Amazon were all made by the same company. They're all the same, somewhat, if you want to look at that video. Understand? Now, in my search for thread tracers, I did find an American company, and they're called Lang. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a comparison between the Chinese one from Amazon and the American-made Lang. And we're going to look at the initial quality and see what it's like. Is it worth the money? Now, the Lang's more money. I mean, these days, anything manufactured in the United States is going to cost more money than it does in China. But sometimes you get what you pay for. And second of all, it keeps somebody in the United States working. This happens to be a factor for me. I try to avoid buying anything Chinese at all if I can. That's my personal take. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's the only place that makes it. I prefer the United States, but I definitely don't want to buy from China. So anyway, we're going to go up to the bench and we're going to do a little comparison. And we're going to look at the product. We're not going to really, test it on stuff. We're just looking at the initial quality, because to me, that's what makes why you buy it. You look at the initial quality. So here we got our two cases. On the left, we have the Chinese one. And if you look at my previous video on buying these from Amazon, all the cases, and whether it has a name like this one does, or here, or it has no name, they're all the same case. Now, at the initial look at the cases, this one has a plastic hinge. So every time you open it, it's going to put wear on it. The US case, even though it's just pinned here and it's a plastic blown case, it actually has a hinge. So it's not going to wear out like this one does and come apart and you have to use rubber bands or whatever to hold it together. Now, except for one extra file, these all have the same taps and dies and files in it. This one has an extra file. This is a 48 piece, this is a 49. On initial look, I feel like the ridges and the flutes and the taps are a little bit more refined or defined. They're a little crisper, if that's the word I want to use. The Chinese dies are better marked than the American dies, as you can see here. Nicely stamped, not too great. So it's harder to see. This one you're definitely going to need glasses on. Now what we're going to do is we're only going to test a couple of them for initial quality. And what we're going to use is my thread checker. If you looked at my video before on checking to see which nuts and bolts you have, you will see that I use this thread checker. It's made in the United States also. So anyway, we're going to look at initial quality. So I'm going to try a couple of taps. This is a 1.75. Okay, unscrewing this in, it gets to a point, like right here, where it's hard to turn, okay? So it's going to be reforming the threads in my thread checker. Now why is that? I don't know, but maybe, I don't know if you can see here, that the ridges aren't quite as well defined, and there's a little bit of burring along the edge of this cutout. But if we try the same one from the US one, screws in no problem. There's a little bit of a wobble, but not much. So I think that shows it's a little bit better. Next up, we're going to try the 1.5. M12 1.5, and we're going to screw that in here. And we get the same type of resistance. So something on this tap creates resistance burrs, not defined well enough. So that bothers me a little bit. So initial on the taps, the American's better. Next up, we're going to try the die. So we try the American die first. Screws right on. Once it's down there, there's a little bit of wobble, but about the same as there was in the tap, so not too bad. Same one for the Chinese one. It screws right on, so that's pretty good. So that's, the die works really well. Okay, we're going to try the 1.5. We'll try the Chinese one first. Okay. Screws on really well. So, so far, the Chinese dies are all right. 1.5 out of the American case. Screws right on. $1.75. Okay, that's one thing I didn't check is how loose this is. So the 1.75, we're going to go back to the Chinese, and we're going to see it screws on pretty good, but how much of a side resistance is there? There's a little more than in this. Now, the files themselves, I feel, oh, let's use the metric. Since we're using the American metric one. There's a 1.75 and a 1.0. Where we got that? Let's see. Okay. If you look at this, the file don't look as crisp or defined as the American one. American one's also a little bit wider, which can or cannot make a difference. No, I'm sorry. The American one, I got that backwards. The American one is the one without the handle. This one, the Chinese one's wider, but the American one looks like it has more definition to it. I don't know. I don't know when I would use the file. It seems to me that if you're going to need to file a bolt, you just use a die. So I don't know if I'd ever use these, but these look to be a little bit crisper. Now, this, like I said before, the stamps are a little bit better on these, especially the dies. You can see them easier. I like this chart better. It shows me everything, whereas this chart just has what sizes they are. This is a little nicer. This one also has 3 different languages, Spanish and French along with the English. Now, if you're going to get this case, this one over here has a little bit of separation for the files. Okay, if they're right not next to each other. If anything you know about files, you don't want files banging each other. So if you buy this American case, put a handle on the end of them, the opposite handle. And that way, your file are protected. Case will still close. But this just adds a little bit of protection to it. And last but not least, if you happen to use one of these dies or taps a lot, it could wear out. I mean, this is supposed to be, they're both supposed to be, high-speed carbon steel, but they may or may not be. But the one thing about the Chinese case is there's nowhere to buy a replacement, just a replacement. If I wanted to get this one or this one, there isn't a replacement, at least not for these companies. Lang makes a single replacement for all of these. I went on their website. There's a way you can buy each one of these individually if one wears out. So that's kind of nice. The other thing about Lang is that even though I have 10 here of these taps and dies, you can get slightly larger ones. In fact, you can buy ones for like axles and stuff like that that are very large. So you can buy individual taps and dies. You don't need just these. But anyway, one of the most important things is you can buy a single to replace what you wear out. I guess that's about it. So on initial quality, the dies seem to be the same, at least for the two I use for M12, 1.5 and 1.7. But the taps were definitely not as smooth as the American one. Now, these kits on Amazon averaged about somewhere around $52 to $55. This kit, if you buy it from Lang, okay, that's the company there. All right, actually, this is just as informative as the other sheet. If you buy from Lang, if you look at their website, it's $147. Now, that's too much money, okay? Well, it's not too much money for a good kit, but if you search around, I got mine at National Tool Outlet or something along those names, and I'll put it in the link. It was $71. So granted, it's about $15 to $20 more than this kit. But as we can see, the taps work better. They're better made. The case is better made. And you can buy replacements, which you cannot do with the Chinese set. These are my thoughts. This is what I did. You don't have to.